All right, so we're going to open up by starting off with the first chapter of our book. It opens up by going into ontology, epistemology, and ethics. And all three of these we can use in our daily lives, in which I found them to be very helpful within mine so far. It also goes into the code of ethics and in within the workplace. I think that this is something that we look at a lot within our workplace in our society today. I think that this can go a long way within our lives, and I think that it can be very, very beneficial. It also goes into talking about the different philosophers throughout history. First, it goes into Socrates, and Socrates describes that as independent in thought, the unexamined life is not worth living. And he was imprisoned for his teachings of false gods and independence, justification for one's actions, and social responsibility. And he also ended up being sentenced to death, which led into our next philosopher, which is Plato. Plato describes that he wanted a life in politics, but carried out his philosophical studies through his virtues and moderation. I think that Plato was a very great philosopher because he had an allegory of the cave, which I think it goes on to describe of these men who were chained on these walls and with the fire behind them, and they couldn't their outlook was skewered because of how it was set up. And I think that this really goes to like see what we actually describe in our lives and what we see as on a daily basis, because it can be manipulated just as these guys were on the wall, which I've seen in my daily life, which I think that it can be a very great allegory. It also goes on to Aristotle, which studies his studies include biology and physics. um Aristotle believes that ethical decision making is a skill and can be explained through science. He believed that moral virtue through action, and he had a golden mean, not necessarily a golden rule, but this was explained through his actions and his teachings. Kant also goes on, and he believes that society's laws are necessary so order can be maintained. He also believes that all men are equal, which is a thought that we also have in our society today. Um, and then after Kant, it goes on to describe the utilitarianism. Utilitarianism says that the best course of action is one that is greatly benefited through everyone's enjoyment. And I think that this one is kind of iffy. I kind of agree with it somewhat, but utilitarianism isn't I don't think should be a way that we should live our lives. I don't think necessarily. It doesn't benefit everybody all the time, but it does bring a very good argument in its point. It goes on for J.S. Mill. J.S. Mill describes that it would be absurd that the estimation of pleasure should be supposed to depend on the quantity alone. So his thought was not necessarily that everyone should be happy or everyone should get enjoyment out of it, but or if it should benefit everybody. Or his thought that it should be the quality is that quality is essential for ethical decision making, which is a very important point that I think Mills brings up in his argument. I think after Mills, it goes into Sir William David Ross, and he believes in keeping promises, showing gratitude to others, practicing justice, making others' lives better, avoiding harm, making amends when necessary, and improving yourself as a person. And I think these qualities are very important within our lives, and I think that we can take something from that and move forward with our lives. The last person who I think that we described in the chapter is John Rawls, and he creates a concept of justice that when you walk through ethical dilemmas, you should not think about your place in society, but rather um, get into your original position, which he describes as a veil of ignorance. Um, John Rawls has very good points in his argument, and I think that is a very good ethical way that we should be able to live our lives. And I think this is a very good chapter to open up with. Um, Thank you for listening, and goodbye.